Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. And today we have another set of crazy revenge stories. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. Hit my car and try to get away? I'll track you down and make you pay double. This happened a few years ago. So my fiancée at the time, now wife, was driving around looking for dresses for her bridesmaids to wear for the wedding. We'd been going from place to place looking for something she liked, but no luck. We'd just finished leaving David's Bridal and were leaving the plaza. It had been raining a lot, so the roads were slick. As I reached the intersection of where the plaza met the road to turn out, another car came turning in. Unfortunately, he didn't brake soon enough and skidded into the front end of the driver's side. Thankfully, everyone was okay. We got out of our cars and looked at the damage. His car, of course, was completely unharmed, and mine had a minor dent. He looked about 45-ish and had his son in the car with him. We exchanged names and phone numbers. He let me know he was on the way to work, and I told him we were just wedding shopping. I was 22 at the time and very naive as to what to do in case of an accident. He told me that we both seemed pretty busy and we should just handle it ourselves since we were busy. We didn't call the police, my mistake, and he told me to get the damage looked at to see what it would cost. I took the car in 2 days later, and they quoted me $1,100 for the bumper to be replaced. I texted him, and he told me he would be getting scholarships in 2 months when he goes back to school, and he would be able to pay me in cash then. I, again naively, told me that'd be fine. A week later, I followed up with him about another estimate I got, which was lower than the original, $900, but I got no response. I texted him again and again for the next few days and nothing. At this point, I realized he had bailed. I came up with a plan to find him. All I had was his name, a now useless phone number, and a general area of where he worked. I searched for him on Facebook and was pretty sure I found him. I searched under his family members and saw what looked like his son. My soon-to-be sister-in-law was 16 and looked about the same age as his son. I decided to go full-on sleuth and go undercover. I used her Facebook and changed her last name to match theirs. I then messaged the son and told him that I thought we might be cousins. I asked him some questions about his dad, like name and his job. I told him that my mom said I have an uncle down there by that name and worked at this guitar shop. He answered yes, that was his dad's name, and told me the name of the place where his dad worked. I was so relieved I was making progress. The next day, I drove up near the accident and found where the man worked, found his car and took pictures of his license plate. I then took all the info I had and went to the courthouse, filled out the paperwork, and handed it to the clerk. The clerk told me they could either mail the form to his work address, or if I paid $25, I could have an officer hand deliver it. Of course, I paid the $25 just to embarrass him at his place of work. A few weeks later, we were summoned to the court to see if we could work things out before going to an actual hearing. He showed up and we sat down with a mediator. She explained everything to all of us. I told him I didn't want to do this, but he stopped responding. He replied that his phone was stolen, so he had to get a new one. In my mind, a phone being stolen doesn't equal changing your phone number. I knew he was lying. The moderator asked him to step outside. She talked to us and told us not to trust him because his story didn't make sense. The mediator invited him back inside, and we read over the terms I listed in the court documents. He was to pay $2,400. I charged him the original replacement cost, gas from driving back and forth, my time for doing all this work, and extra just for being an a-hole. He said he would pay, but didn't like that I went to his job and took pictures of his car. I replied, I didn't like that he hit my car. A few months later, he paid the full amount in cash and had to pay for our court costs as well. I sold the damaged car and took the cash he gave me to buy another car fully in cash. All in all, I benefited from it. But next time, I'll just call the cops and save myself the headache. You should get yourself a dash cam. They are silent witnesses that can help when it's not clear-cut for the officer. And our second story. Local hero sticks it to City Hall. This happened quite a few years ago. Where my hometown is, there's a thing called ALR, Agricultural Land Reserve. Basically, there are areas of land that can only ever be used for agriculture. In order to protect prime agriculture land from becoming highways and strip malls and things like that. A friend of a friend, let's call him Fred, had inherited a piece of such land on the outskirts of the city, and he had no interest in doing any kind of farming, but the ALR rules allow for the property's owner to have a personal residence on the land. So he built a house on it and had a nice place to live just outside of town. Now, City Hall has ways of acquiring ALR land and using it for non-agricultural projects. I'm not familiar with how exactly, but they can, and it's just about impossible for anybody else to. One thing the city would do is acquire ALR land and turn it into condo developments. They had a vision for 3 high-end condos to be built where Fred's property was. They had already bought the properties on either side of Fred's land and were going after his too. The city was only offering Fred the property value, and since he just built a house there, he would be losing on the deal, so Fred said no. While the condos were being built on either side of Fred, the city used every tool they could to try and expropriate Fred's land, but the ALR restrictions made it tricky. Finally, they told Fred that since his land was ALR, they needed to be using it for agriculture within 30 days, or they could take it from him. Fred's response? Pig farm. He crammed as many pigs onto his property that he legally could. Full compliance with farming regulations, health and safety, whole 9 yards. Since he'd fulfilled his obligations with the ALR, the city could not touch him. Period. The city had already pre-sold a number of these condos, and naturally, none of the buyers were very happy to have spent a small fortune to live next to a big, stinky pig farm. Most of the buyers obtained grounds for dismissal on their purchase agreements, while the rest filed a big lawsuit. The city's project was sinking fast. The city started negotiating with Fred, and the story ends with the city finally making Fred an offer for his land that was so ridiculous he had no choice but to accept. The city finished their condo project, but thanks to Fred, they didn't make nearly as much money off it as they had anticipated. And our next story. Sue me! I'm a lawyer. It's the topic of my stories. But I haven't always been a lawyer. I was a law student once, and law students have all the arrogance of a lawyer. 1% of the knowledge, but 10 times the reckless abandon. Here's how that all came together. I moved to D.C. to do the last semester of my law schooling at Georgetown. I jumped on an apartment with 2 other people, but never met the landlord. The people liked me, said I could move in, but they said the landlord had a review process that could take a few weeks, because he's lazy or slow. They also mentioned he was a huge jerk, never fixed anything, hadn't so much as mowed the grass in years, and hadn't paid the light bill in the lobby for months, so we had no porch lights. Whatever, I thought, I needed a place. I asked them if they cared if I moved in that day, though, and they were fine with it. I knew enough landlord-tenant law in D.C. to know that the tenant basically always wins, so long as they're paying and not destroying the property. We used to call it the peeing on the walls rules. So I moved in and just skipped the interview, sent my first check to the landlord right away, a deposit, followed immediately by a month's rent. He deposited them as soon as he got them. A week later or so, he raises hell about me moving in without an interview and threatens to kick me out. I kindly point out that he had accepted my deposit and rent payment, and therefore I was officially a tenant. If he wanted to kick me out, he would have to start the process in court, which is expensive and takes forever. He huffed and left me alone. I quietly paid my rent for months and months, but alas, all good things come to an end, and I had to move out eventually. I emailed the landlord 2 months, then 1 month in advance of leaving. I let him know that he should come inspect the property to make sure I'd not caused any damage that would require my deposit, and that if not, I would like it back. I never heard from him. The time eventually came that I was done living there and moving out. I had everything packed and was ready to leave. I notified the landlord that I would like my deposit back. He said if I wanted it back, I could start the process in court. I smiled. I already knew that was coming. Turns out, Mr. Landlord, those emails I sent you happen to correspond with the exact days and timing that I'm required to give you in order to get my security deposit back. Oh, by the way, that request to come inspect the premises that you never replied to was also part of the process. And by not coming, you have officially waived your inspection as of today, 45 days later or something. Also, I happen to have already filled out the small claim for return of a security deposit. Here's your copy. I'm electronically filing this with the court today. Good luck. And about 10 days later, I got a check in the mail. And our last story. Cheat your employee out of a $2 raise? That'll be $20,000. Several years ago, when he was in college, Chris worked as a lifeguard at a water park in Cincinnati. After about a year, his bosses promoted him to a managerial role and promised him a raise. His new duties were more than just keeping an eye on the water. Chris managed the daily schedule for all lifeguards and tested the water's chemical levels. Each morning when he opened the park, he would be the first one down its water slides, testing them for safety. More than 6 months into his new position, Chris's paycheck remained the same, $8 an hour instead of the $10 he was promised. Week after week, I would ask about it, he says, and management would keep making excuses. Then came a corporate announcement. Chris's manager said they would cut employees' pay by 10% due to financial difficulties. Chris felt slighted. Now his pay was less than what he started out earning despite his managerial duties. I decided, okay, if they really don't care about me and they don't value me and what I do for the water park, then maybe I'll just stop doing it, he says. So on a busy summer day, Chris didn't show up to open the park. He let the flood of subsequent texts and voicemails from his managers go unanswered. No one else with his level of training was able to come in that morning. I ultimately caused the shutdown of the water park for that Friday, Chris says. He estimates that he cost the park between $15,000 and $20,000 in customer revenue for what would have been a yearly raise of a few $1,000s. Soon he ghosted. Chris landed a job making more money as a pizza delivery driver. He now works for a Fortune 500 company. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.